Hey everybody, and welcome to the DenziBlitz here on the ECS network. I'm your host Mike, and we did take a week off to do sort of a DenziCaster special presentation last week, some interviews that I conducted at Big Fandom Greenville in November. But we're back with a brand new Blitz. We are starting today our look at Uchuu Keiji Shaider, which is this dude back here behind me in the blue. We will pick him up here. Now, if you are a fan here in the United States of where I'm at, and you remember VR Troopers, then this is going to look a little familiar to you. The Scheider costume served as Ryan Steele, the main hero from VR Troopers. It served as his armor in season 2 of the show. VR Troopers, which was by Saban, featured footage from different Metal Hero shows. Initially, they took 2 shows. Spielbahn is where they got the footage for 2 of the characters, JB and Caitlin, and then Ryan Steele, the main character of the show. His footage in season 1 came from Metalder, which is also where all the villain footage came from for the main bad guys. In season 2, they basically exhausted all the footage from Metalder they could use, so they backtracked to Space Sheriff Shaider and started incorporating that footage, which makes it actually the oldest, show Saban ever adapted, because it came out in 1984, and VR Troopers came out quite a ways after that. This is, of course, this episode being the first episode of a new Blitz, we're going to talk a little bit about background of the show as a whole and things like that. This show is the 3rd part of the Space Sheriff Trilogy, as it has come to be known. You start with Space Sheriff Gavin, which we have previously covered here on the Blitz, and then you have Space Sheriff Sharivan, which I unfortunately have not seen all of, nor do I have all of. So that's one of the reasons we kind of jumped ahead to the 3rd part of the trilogy, which is Space Sheriff Shaider. Although of the 3, it's probably the most independent of the 3 in a lot of ways, because you meet Sharivan at the end of Space Sheriff Gavin. So you kind of want to watch Gavin before you watch Sharivan. It kind of makes sense. Scheider, there are characters from the previous shows. For instance, Mimi is an instructor at the Galactic Police Union Academy at the beginning of the show, but that's about it. There's no real mention as to who she is. There's no call out, and if you haven't seen Gavin, then it's not going to hurt anything or change anything really too much. All of the different Space Sheriff shows enjoyed popularity overseas. Gavin, in particular, was very popular in France, where it was retitled Exor. Sharivan had its fair share of international acclaim. Scheider got really big in the Philippines, I believe it was. And when it was released to the Philippines, they simply referred to it as Scheider. Now, the show's international title, according to Toei for distribution, was Space Captain Shaider. But here, it was just Scheider, and that was it. It did get released, for the record, in France, and kind of had a mixed reaction. It didn't get the acclaim that Gavin had. But Scheider hits the Philippines like wildfire, and was hugely popular there. As a matter of fact, they actually wound up in the Philippines around 2007-ish, tried to get the rights, and did briefly secure the rights to do a Space Sheriff Shaider remake. Ultimately, that was not the kind of the rug got pulled out from under it. So instead, they were given the green light to do a very loose sequel called Zyto. The full name of the show, translated into English, would have been Zydo the Space Cops, or some people would translate as the Space Sheriffs because it's a reference to the original shows. Um, Bottom line, that show has had really mixed reactions to it over the years. I haven't really seen that much of it, but there you go. Whether or not they ever planned to do more Space Sheriff shows after Scheider, who knows? Just Beyond would be the series that would follow Scheider in the Metal Heroes line, but it wasn't a Space Sheriff show. It had a sort of a police investigator theme to it, but strictly speaking, it was not a Space Sheriff show. Although elements of it have somehow crept their way back into the Space Sheriff lexicon and canon over the years. So let's talk a little bit here about the actors in this show, which, by the way, the show debuted March of 1984. So the show is now 33 years old as I'm recording this. So the star of our show is Hiroshi Tsuburaya. If that last name sounds familiar, it really, really should if you're a Tokusatsu fan. Hiroshi Tsuburaya is the grandson of Eiji Tsuburaya, the godfather of Tokusatsu. Eiji Tsuburaya was the guy that did the special effects for Godzilla, the original Godzilla suit creator. He was the special effects director for Toho on a lot of the early Godzilla films. And of course, he's the creator of Ultraman, which is still produced by Tsuburaya Productions to this day. So Hiroshi is one of those very odd and infrequent ties between Toei's Tokusatsu franchises and then the Toho and Tsuburaya franchises. In fact, he is probably the biggest link because he's blood relation, so to speak, between the two franchises. He appeared now his character did appear in Charivan, or at the very least, he did. I don't know if he played the same character, to be honest. Dai Sawamura, Space Sheriff Shaider. He also appeared in Ultraman Tiga, Dyna, and Gaia. He was in Ultra 7, The Ground of the Earthlings. He was in the Ultraman Tiga Dyna movie, and he was in Ultra Q, the movie. So he did go back and do a lot of stuff with the Tsuburaya Productions properties after his time on the Space Sheriff shows. Unfortunately, Tsuburaya passed away back in 2001, so he is no longer with us. But his run here on Scheider, we will talk about because we've watched the first 5 episodes, and I'm not sure what I think. His sidekick is Space Sheriff Annie, who from Jump Street, they call her Space Sheriff Annie, which I found to be pretty darn cool. That they say from the word go that she's a space sheriff. Mimi and Marine from Gavin really don't get that distinction during the show. They're not really referred to or spoken of as space sheriffs. So the fact that they give that to Annie here is really cool. Annie is played by Naomi Morinaga. Naomi would play Annie here in Gavin, or not Gavin, in Scheider. And then the following few years later, she would be in Spielbahn, playing Helen slash Helvira, which is a character that oddly is in VR Troopers. So Helen has the same armor as a hero that Caitlin Starr did in VR Troopers. Helvira was oh my goodness, I forget what they called it in VR Troopers, but it was the red something armor, but it was basically the evil female VR Trooper. She appeared in Scheider. She was in a few different movies over the years. She actually reprises her role as Annie in the Space Sheriff Shaider Next Generation movie. She was in Kamen Rider Z-O in 1993. So she's done a good bit of genre work over the years. And we're going to talk about her as we go into these episodes because she is a high point of this series to me. Shozo, oh my goodness, I'm going to murder this one. Shozo Iizuka is the voice of Lord Kublai, our big bad for the series. For the record, he actually was the voice of Don Horror for about the first 10 episodes of Gavin. And then he would be the voice of Demon King Psycho in Charavan. So he shows up a lot. He's Satan Goss in Jespion. He's General Death Zero in Spielbahn. He is General Duranga in Metalder. He is Dokusai in Jiraiya. He is Dr. Giba in Jiban. The guy was in the first 8 Metal Hero shows as a voice actor. This is not unusual for Tokusatsu, for the voice acting talent to come back over and over and over and over again through multiple shows. And actually, in the Space Sheriff Spirits video game, he actually reprised the roles of Don Horror, Psycho, and Kublai. He was the voice of the Big Bad in all 3 of the first Space Sheriff shows, which is another not uncommon thing. It happened more in Kamen Rider, where you would have someone as the voice of, I think the guy that was the voice of the Great Leader was the Great Leader through pretty much the whole darned thing. For the record, Iizuka also has had work outside of that. He was in Kamen Rider 5's Paradise Lost. He's the voice of Gorgum High Priest Dorome in Kamen Rider Black. I mean, the guy's done a lot of work. If you're not a fan of... Actually, he was... Yeah, I think he was just the voice. I don't think he was the dude in the suit. And if you're... if you're not a fan of Tokusatsu, but you're a fan of anime, the guy's Nappa. He's the Japanese voice of Nappa, too. But he's been doing this stuff all the way back since, like, Go Ranger. So he's been in a whole lot of stuff. I actually just found the sort of the definitive list of his Toku voice acting work, and goodness gracious, it's a lot. But you know, he's one of the vets and one of the shining stars, so to speak, here. Kazuhiko Kubo plays Commander Hessler, which, near as I can tell, must have been his only credit in Tokusatsu. And then Jun Yoshida plays Priest Po. He would also wind up in Kamen Rider Black and in Jiraiya. He would do a voice in Jiraiya. Although, oddly enough, he actually was the first person to audition to actually be Scheider. So he didn't get that role, but he wound up in the show anyway, which is pretty darn cool. We're going to focus mainly here on Tsuburaya and Naomi Morinaga, as we talk more and more about these episodes. So the 5 episodes we looked at today is Episode 1, The Strange World. Episode 2, Dance Peto Peto. Episode 3, Annie Doesn't Listen. Episode 4, The Children Who Became Animals. And Episode 5, Suddenly, Lazy People. Those wonderful Japanese episode titles again. So, to kind of go through these episodes really, really briefly, and then to talk about likes, dislikes, and so on. Episode 1, The Strange World, is our introduction to Scheider. We see the Space Sheriff Academy. Planet Mount is destroyed by the Fuma, which is our big bad guy faction. Fushigi World Fuma, or Strange World, if you prefer. But the Fuma wind up subjugating worlds, destroying worlds. When they destroy Planet Mount, it mobilizes the Space Sheriffs. They quite literally promote the entire senior class to active duty as Space Sheriffs all at once. One of which is Dai Sawamura, a.k.a. Scheider, and one of them is Annie, who will be his partner. Annie is a native of Planet Mount, and as far as she knows, now the sole survivor of her world. So in many ways, the the immediate emphasis of the story is on her. She's the immediate emotional center of the tale. We do wind up with the Fuma planning to target Earth next. So with that in mind, Dai is given the powers and the armor of Space Sheriff Shaider with his promotion and is sent on his way to protect Earth with Annie as his partner. Dance Peto Peto, we get sort of one of the early plots in the series. The first few episodes revolve around the Fushigi song, which plays and weird things happen. Episode 2, the Dance Peto Peto, which in and of itself could explain why a lot of people are scared of clowns if they saw this episode as a kid. The song is used to possess essentially animals and cause these animals to go wild and attack anyone, including their own owners. The idea is to, I guess, just make people really sad because they have no pets. At least that's sort of the vibe I got. Episode 3, Annie Doesn't Listen. We suspect that we have found another survivor of Planet Mount. Scheider realizes probably not, that it's got to be a trap. Annie doesn't listen and goes to follow the lead anyway, which leads to essentially a rose, her encountering a rose that can make people hallucinate their fondest wish and dream as if it were reality. And in her case, it is that someone survived Planet Mount, namely her family. And her family, she sees them. They're actually monsters in disguise, but she sees them as her family, and they tell her that Scheider is evil and that he is responsible for thousands of deaths, and she winds up attacking Scheider until he manages to snap her out of it. The children who become animals is pretty much what it sounds like. The newest Fuma plot is to turn kids into animals. So it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. And then suddenly Lazy People is them introducing, the Fuma introducing people to their god, as it is described in the episode, who tells them, why do anything? Why work? Why worry about math? Why study? Why work out when you can just relax and have fun and do nothing? And the plot is to make humanity lazy as all get out, so that they can very easily take things over. If we're putting together an essentials list, only 2 of these episodes make it, and that's episodes 1 and 3. So, The Strange World and Annie Doesn't Listen. Visually, from a costuming standpoint, this show is on point. I would be very hard-pressed to tell you which hero armor I prefer, Gavin or Scheider. I give Gavin a whole lot of credit because it's the first Metal Hero show. It's the suit that inspired the look of RoboCop, for crying out loud. But the Scheider suit, to me, looks so much more dynamic. I think it's largely due to the blue chrome, which gives it this very cool feel. I've never been a huge fan of chrome red as I glance up to my Charavan figure art over here on the shelf. I like that costume too, but the Gavin costume looked very sleek, but you could tell it was the first one. The Charavan costume looked really blocky in places to me, and so it almost looks like, from a design evolution, it almost looks like it's a step backwards from Gavin, whereas Scheider actually looks like an evolution of the suit. So I do really like the Scheider costume. I like most of the monster costumes. There's the Girl 5 is what they're called in the first episode I watched, because I got them from 2 different subtitling groups. But the essentially the Kunoichi 5, or whatever you want to call them, their costumes look pretty cool. I like most of the villain costumes in the piece. I like the Gumps. The Gumps did make an appearance in VR Troopers as the updated Skugs. Um, but the effects leave me a little wanting. There's an awful lot of stock footage. Even in the first 5 episodes, it becomes noticeable. Um, so that's one. The matte painting work, which was really good on Gavin, is still really good here, but I think they take it a bit too far. Um, the matte painting work, the reason it worked in Gavin for um, Maku Space is because there's not a lot of detail to it, which I know may sound counterintuitive, but it lets your mind fill in the blanks. Here, there's a lot of detail to some of these matte paintings, and it leaves questions because it doesn't. The more detail you put in it, it doesn't always look really good when matched up with everything else. The sets for Fushigi World, for the Strange World scenes, are pretty good. More or less on par with Gavin. Gavin, they improved over the course of the series. I'm hoping to see the same thing here. The attacks and whatnot, there's a whole heck of a lot of reliance on firearms in this show. Scheider actually has a gun. He's the first space sheriff to have one. Because I don't remember. Again, I will glance up here. Nope. I guess Gavin's the only one that didn't have one. My bad. Sharvon had a gun. I don't know how often Sharvon used his. The video beam gun gets used a lot, as does Annie's sidearms. The effects for those are not bad. The vehicles work. This feels very toyetic for a 1980s tokusatsu show, more so than I'm used to. You can tell there's a lot of roll out the toy scenes in this. But the miniature work is so far is pretty good. The effects work so far is pretty good. The compositing leaves a little bit to be desired. Some of the green screen, blue screen work. Gavin, I saw what I swear was like front or was a rear projection work. In a lot of places, you don't necessarily see that here. There's a whole lot of blue screen, green screen stuff going on, and probably some rotoscoping kind of stuff, and it's obvious in places. So that is a little bothersome, and I say a little only because I saw Gavin, and it looked better there. But again, they're growing into it. So it's the beginning of a series. The reason I harp on it slightly here is because it is the third Space Sheriff series. They've had 2 years to perfect this, so they should have learned lessons from the other shows. The music. The opening theme is I don't like. The closing theme I actually think is much better. The interstitial music is pretty good. They took a lot of musical cues from the other shows. Again, haven't seen Charavan's. I don't know how much of that music actually came out of Charavan, but I can tell you for a fact that there was music out of Gavin in this show. Initially, when Scheider breaks out his laser blade, it's the laser blade music from Gavin initially, with very slight rearrangement. But it's very obvious that that's what it is. The formula of the episodes leaves me slightly confused. There were episodes of Gavin where Gavin had to use Dole, the spaceship turned dragon, to finish off bad guys who became really big. Most of the time, it was just the laser blade was all he needed. Here, in almost every episode, we do get the laser blade finishing off the human bad guy, but then sort of this archway shows up and starts making its way towards everything. And Scheider calls on his ship to actually turn into a giant mecha a la a Megazord or whatnot, or a Sentai mecha there at one point. Most of the time it just turns into a giant gun that a holographic Scheider fires. Giant wireframe Scheider, which is the final attack you probably saw most often in VR Troopers. Here, I don't understand why you would have to do it. And when they use the robot form of the spaceship, it's really lacking. One of the weaknesses of them using that robot in Fushigi Space, you realize that it's supposed to still be the size of a spaceship, but there's nothing there to give you a sense of scale. There's no mountains, no trees, no buildings, no anything to give you any indication, and it's not shot in a way that gives it any weight that would give it a sense of scale through movement. So that I can do with less of the robot, at least for now. We'll see if it improves later. Story wise, it's pretty much episodic tokusatsu from the 1980s. I find it very interesting that the emotional center of the story is Annie. Annie is far and away right now the most interesting character in the show. I really do like her. I like her because, for one, she jumps into the middle of everything. She is a fighter. She is a space sheriff by cracky, and she's going to get in there and mix it up. And you do not see her taking a back seat to Scheider. You do not see her shying away from the monsters. You see her getting in the thick of it, mixing it up, and holding her own, which I think is outstandingly cool. You don't even necessarily see that now in 2017 in tokusatsu shows. But back then, she's not a civilian, but she has no powers. So she can't even do the laser vision turn into a bird thing from Gavin that Mimi and Marine could do. She has no powers, but she's really good with a gun, by goodness. So there you go. And you see her fighting side by side with Scheider, and to the credit of all concerned, Scheider does not push her aside or say, you can't handle this, run, hide, do this, do that. No, he has her as a partner. So I really dig that. And Naomi does a really good job in the role. Hiroshi Tsuburaya as Scheider, I'm enjoying his performance as Scheider. It's going to grow on me, I know, but after seeing Kenji Oba kick ass as Gavin for a full season, Hiroshi Tsuburaya feels a little bit like a kid pretending to be a man, which I know is really, really harsh. But I know he'll grow into it because I can see the acting chops. I can start to see that. The action chops are what I'm not seeing. But I know good and well that's something that's a growing pain every tokusatsu show goes through. Gavin didn't go through it because Kenji Oba was an established toku actor and stuntman before he ever got there. So we're gonna give it a pass and see what they can do with it. The story right now, though, the thing is, there's no, beyond simply being the space sheriff assigned to Earth, Scheider has no arc. He has no story established. We're 5 episodes in. There were already bits and pieces and groundwork laid for Gavin's story, his hero's journey, within the first 5 episodes. We haven't gotten that for Scheider yet. I really hope we do. If Scheider is effectively just, I'm the cop assigned this beat for the entire series, I'm gonna be disappointed in that. I love that they've given Annie such a heavy story up front. Now what do you do with Scheider? Because he's the hero of the show. Is this going to be one of those cases, and I've seen toku shows like this before, where the person they named the show after is not the central character? I'm wondering very early if that's the case. So folks, that pretty much wraps up my thoughts here for part 1 of our look at Space Sheriff Shaider. Right now, we're probably going to do 9 parts like we did for Gavin. Next time around, we're going to look at the next 6 episodes. So we're going to get through episode 11 next time. That's my current plan. Although card subject to change, as they say. let me know what you guys think of Space Sheriff Shaider. If you've seen it, if you're watching episodes of it along with me, let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give us a thumbs down. That's a-okay. Just let us know why. That's all we ask. That's what the comment section is for. Hit that subscribe button. That really helps us out as well. And if you want to help support DenziBlitz and all the other great shows here on the channel, you can visit our Cafe Press store, cafepress.com/ECS Network, and pick yourself up some cool swag, t-shirt, what have you. Though that helps to go support the channel. It does not line anyone's pockets. It helps us get new equipment, lights, cameras, other such things. You get the idea. So folks, I thank you very kindly. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in 7 days for more Uchuu Keiji Shaider.